Welcome back, everybody, to another Observability Expert Insight series. And this quarter's series is about achieving proactive monitoring. And we're going to start off with the alert and response number one with Splunk AppDynamics. I'm your host, Christopher Bonato, and I'm here today with our guest speaker, Drew Osborne, who has a lot of experience dealing with health rules and making sure that people are successful with it, both as a customer, as a consultant, PS, and now over here as a customer success engineer. So I'm very excited to have him with us today. And then we have Bill Harper as our dedicated panelist. If you guys have questions along the way, he'll be able to help you, and we'll touch more on that. Let's go into some housekeeping items. All right, so we're going to assume that you have a basic understanding of AppDynamics and what goes into it. But at the same time, if you have questions along the way, we don't want to discourage you from asking those questions. However, you will be on you will be on mute, so you would have to do it either in the chat or in the Q&A section. The Q&A section is in the bottom right corner. There's 3 dots, if you'll notice. When you click on that, you'll see the Q&A, and what this does is it'll pop out a little window and it'll have your message or your questions kind of saved in time, and then we can answer in line right there. And then if anybody else wants to see your question, it'll be there for everybody to look at. So very helpful, and it will account for, if anybody else has that same question, they can go there and see if somebody already asked it. But at the same time, if you have feedback or if you just, can't find the Q&A and you want to use the chat, we'll try to help you as best we could. And we'll be providing links as well. This is going to be recorded and it's going to be out on our YouTube page. So we'll definitely make sure to provide you that link so that you can go check that out, send it to your friends and colleagues that missed it. Or if you want to follow back up on it later and kind of reference, what was that step again? And then lastly, as a disclaimer, obviously this content is created for and by Cisco. It's meant for our customers to be successful with the products that we support in observability. It's not necessarily meant for you to take it and redistribute it or anything like that. So everyone's on the up and up. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our expert speaker, Drew.
Hey, thank you, Chris, and thank you for everybody who joined today. I am excited to go over a quick review of the Alert and Respond module. This first session, I'm going to try to keep things pretty basic, but as we go through the Alert and Respond model, I'm going to talk about some of the settings that, we can use to, have an impact on the end product of our health rules and the quality of them. We're going to really try to keep the amount of slides to a minimum here. So I'm just going to do a basic high-level overview of Alert and Respond in the slides, and we're going to dive into real-world demo and a controller. So with that, let's pop over the 3 components that we're going to be talking about that are important for this discussion are going to be health rules, policies, and actions. Now, health rules, if you're familiar, they let us define certain performance characteristics. Any of the metrics that we're going to collect from an agent, we can use as a condition in a health rule to define what is either healthy or what is unhealthy. And we can combine those into pretty powerful statements. I'm going to bounce to actions here. Actions are essentially, what do we do when something happens in the tool? Those are going to be things like send an email, take a thread dump. We even have the ability to do remediation scripts. So if we have, every time this condition happens, we know we need to do this because it's something, a known issue right now. Maybe we need to restart a service. We can actually automate that stuff with actions in the tool. And a policy, essentially to keep things really simple, and I'm going to go in more depth on these, a policy ties an action to a health rule and tells you what conditions you want the action to actually occur during. So with that being said, I'm going to quickly show this. This is a kind of a drawing or a visualization of our Alert and Respond module. The top blue dotted line is essentially where the health rules are. The middle box is the policy layer, and the bottom box is the action layer. So you can kind of see we give you a good representation of the actual data flow within the UI of the tool, right? So with that being said, we're going to dive right into the demo. So when I log into a controller, I'm going to be just brought to the overview page. There's a couple different ways we can get to the alert and respond module. I want to call out alert and respond is unique to each application in the controller, right? So keep that in mind. We can have unique health rules, actions, and policies across multiple applications, but a lot of orgs from a best practice standpoint, having one policy and action to send to service now ends up being the production state, right? So a lot of times, you'll have one production way of dealing with alerts when we're done with this, but for testing, we allow a lot of flexibility. So you can see, I'll see a list of apps that I've already interacted with on this screen. If I've been in the APM or been in the controller, this might be blank for me if I haven't. So I can either go to applications, pick my app, I can click alert and respond over on the left-hand side. If I do the left-hand option, I want to call out that the context of which application needs to be manually selected. So if I were to go through the app view and click AD-AIR and then go to alert and respond, I'd already be in the app context for AD-AIR. So just kind of choose what's best for you. I personally like to click the app and go to alert and respond, and you will see it auto populates for me. You're going to see that image that we showed you in the slide deck. I just wanted to call that out. That's always there for you. You don't need to remember it. And honestly, once you've done this for one app, usually it's pretty simple to understand. It's not super complex. But if there are questions, obviously we got a great team here to answer any. Also, as I'm going through this, if you have questions or I talk about a best practice with a particular setting, please, if there are more questions, include those. We definitely want to make sure we get everything answered. So again, health rules. Health rules compare performance metrics against their baseline or other thresholds. When performance fails to satisfy the health rule, a violation event will get created. And you create those with logic you set. It's not always clear cut what you need to set, but we give you the ability to see all the metrics, make intelligent choices about the thresholds you put in them. And when they're not working, we use a similar cycle to development, right? We're going to tweak, iterate, and improve versus just, let it sit out there and stagnate or perhaps not add value. Actions. Actions are the responses that we direct AppD to take when a policy is violated. And when that policy is violated, it's usually tied to a health rule violation. So policies then send the alerts, perform diags, execute scripts, etc. Today, we're going to use a real simple use case. I'm going to make two health rules, one for application availability and one for overall application response time. So if you are following along, we're going to use two different entities. And an entity, for anybody who doesn't know, is any object we collect metrics on in AppD once it's configured. So we're going to do application availability, overall response time, and a simple action to send those via email through a policy. But we'll talk about all the little things that we can tweak along the way. Before I dive right into creation, I have two samples. I just want to call out a few things here. If you have ever played with health rules on your own controller and you're struggling to know, is my health rule working? I want you to know, and I saved these in advance because you can already see the color is showing up. It's telling me the current health based on the evaluation criteria. I call this out because if you ever have a health rule that you save and it stays gray, it never populates a color. Something That's an indicator, a visual indicator that there's probably an issue with the conditions or the metrics don't exist. And so that'll be a challenge for the health rule. I want you to know that because I want you to avoid saving a health rule that you think is working and it never actually evaluates the first time. So be very careful. Once it has, like in this case, you can see this one is red. Now I can go over to any existing health rules that I have created. I can actually look how many times this is fired. Oh boy, in the last 3 days, it's fired 89 times. As a consult, if I put my consultant hat on, that is already way too many alerts to send to an app team. That's an indicator that I need to tune this to have better parameters. So I just want to call out how I use some of these views to help me make educated decisions on the best way to proceed with the health rule. So I want to call out this switch right here. This turns off health rule evaluation. Doesn't matter how many health rules there are, it would stop evaluating all health rules for the app. It's a gated choice. You can't do this on accident, but just be careful. I've seen people switch that off on accident, and the policy would never tell you. So if somebody disables health rule evals, your actions and policies will never fire in an app. Just be aware of that. There's no alert for this. We're going to leave this on. These are samples of what we're going to create, but I just wanted you to see a little bit of the UI and how it gives value for the health rules once they're saved as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create, we're going to start with application availability. I have the ability to give it a name, right? The name I use here, I highly recommend organizational standardization, right? You want nomenclature for one app alert to mean this. If it's for response time, it should read and look the same, whether it's app A or app B. I think consistency across apps is very important here to drive the culture needed to be successful in alerting, so everybody's using the same language. So EIS test, we're going to call it over application availability. Okay, this checkbox, what name, I guess name, I want to give it a very descriptive name that tells me when I read it. I don't need to know what AppD is doing to know if I got an availability alert, right? If I use the right verbiage here, let's do application is down, even better, right? The name I choose here is usually going to be what people see when they respond to the alert the first time. The enable checkbox, that is to enable or disable the health rule evaluation for this specific health rule. So maybe I don't know exactly what conditions I want, but I have a new requirement. I'm playing around with a new requirement from an app team. I can simply save this with it unchecked and start to build what I end up wanting to test, right? And eventually come back and simply toggle, edit the health rule later, and then just check this box to re-enable it. When is the health rule enabled? We're going to keep this basic for this use case, but always is pretty standard, safe choice. Now I recognize each app's going to have maintenance. Each server is going to have a maintenance window. I want to call out, we give a variety. The top one is a custom one, but every other one that you see is available out of box in AppD in any of your applications today. So you'll see everything except the EIS test cron job one that I created at the top with what, kind of what's pre-built. If you click the button, again, we give you a more descriptive view. And I want to call out that you can make your own health rule schedule based on your maintenance requirements for your app. And you can go down to one-time reoccurring. We give a lot of flexibility here. We even let you do cron expressions. So if you're savvy with those, you can do some very powerful things with those. Cron is usually a good practice here. And there's plenty of tools available on the web that just allow you to input what your schedule is, and it'll output the cron expression for you. So I just want people to know essentially that you can create a custom schedule. What would that do? That would deter, I actually can have it, the health rule disable itself based on the schedule. Now, later on, I'm going to talk about action suppression versus health rule schedules. We haven't got to action suppression yet. I'm going to talk about that, but I want people to know I want people to understand, why would I use a health rule schedule versus an action suppression? What's the benefit? Because they both essentially are different ways of accomplishing the same thing, which is don't send an alert during a maintenance window, right? Action suppression, though, if I use a health rule schedule, this health rule during my maintenance window, it won't fire at all. It's not even checking. We evaluate health rules every minute. When that checkbox for enabled is unchecked, it's just not evaluating this one in the 1 minute evaluations it's doing. If we use a schedule, it'll disable it during that, meaning the app will not change color from green to red based on the conditions of my health rule. Now think about this. Maybe I don't want any alerts to fire, but I do want the AppD tool to reflect reality, that the app is down even though it's in maintenance, but maybe I don't want to send an alert. That's when I use an action suppression. That way the UI would still show it's unhealthy, but nobody would be notified via an action suppression. So do you want the tool to show the health? If that doesn't matter, just use a health rule schedule. If it can be green, even though the app's down because of scheduled maintenance. If you want to see it's down in the tool and it's red during scheduled maintenance, but you don't want an alert, do an action suppression. That's your gated choice, right? And not many people use action suppressions, to be clear. Use data from last 30 minutes. Just want to call out, we can go from 1 to 120. Minimum, this is the minimum amount of data for us to draw a conclusion on the health rule criteria. By default, a lot of times will use 30 minutes, but I can tweak this based on my requirements. So think about, am I testing? Maybe because I'm testing a health rule, I want to just use a little data so I can impact the criteria and then see it change health quicker versus wait every 30 minutes. I might want to change this value down to use less data during testing. But now that I figured out my conditions, maybe I want to use more data. And in 30 minutes, remember, we're going to have 30 data points. We get 1 data point per minute. So the default means we're going to look back on 30 data points of data that we have available. We'll leave that for as the default. And if there's questions about tweaking that, by all means, please add them. And I can, Chris, or Bill, if it's a good question aligning with best practice discussion, I'll take those up in the QA. Wait time after violations are an interesting setting. So essentially the tool, when a health rule fires out of box, this setting says, if I have a violation event, let's say for availability, and it's still down in 30 minutes, it has not changed, it's still critical, I can send another alert saying the alert is continuing on a 30-minute interval, or I can change this to lower and send a repeat alert for a sustained failure every 5 minutes after it starts for the duration of the event. Not many people send repeat alerts. My opinion on this is the best practice that I try to achieve with my customers. I want the first alert to be meaningful and be actionable. If it's not, that to me is an opportunity to tune the health rule. And so I would never send repeat alerts, so that if the issue's still occurring 4 hours, when I look at my email and I've got 50 emails now I look at it. I want that first email to be the impactful one. And so we'll talk more about wait time after violation and where that applies in the policy area when we get there. Affected, so we're just going to use 30/30 to keep things simple for this. Affected entities. Again, an entity is whatever we collect a metric on. Simple. Think of it that way. We categorize the entity types to try to make it a little easier for you to navigate, the tool to navigate down to where the metrics exist. So the list you see here is actually kind of how we organize metrics in the backend schema almost. Think of it as it aligns with this, the way they're stored. What I choose here has an impact on my choices for the rest of my health rule creation process and on the criteria that I can add from a condition standpoint. So if you ever are making a health rule and you're clicking something here and you're not seeing the criteria you expected, it's probably a good indicator that we're not picking the right entity, and that's kind of a telltale sign. You won't see the right criteria that you expect. In this case, for application availability, we're going to use tier node health hardware. With time, you'll just learn where certain metrics are stored and what they mean. And this is very much, I'm asking you to trust me here. What I'm showing you is going to be a metric that can only essentially report to the controller when our agent and your app is up. That metric exists in this category. Notice it changed what I have down below. What does this health rule affect? Tiers or nodes? Why does that matter? Well, where do I want the color change to occur when something goes unhealthy? This gives me flexibility, and I can change. Why would I use one setting versus another? The answer is what does availability mean to your client or your app team? Let's say I have 3 tiers. One tier's for payments, one's for web, one's for API, right? But I have 2 nodes in each tier. If one of the 2 nodes goes down and my app still runs, do I want to send an app is down alert? Or do I want to require both nodes in the tier to be down? This tells me where I'm going to change the color. If I did nodes, you could have one of the 2 nodes turn red and the other node stay available in green. But if I had tier selected here and one of the 2 nodes goes down in my example, it's going to turn the tier red no matter what. So I have flexibility, and I can tailor this based on how highly available my app is with kind of these settings. And you can see I have more flexibility. In this case, I want to know if any node is not reporting. So we're going to select nodes. Now I'm going to go over to critical criteria, and we are going to add a condition. Now, I want to call out, in a health rule, you can have multiple conditions. I just hit the button and it keeps stacking them. I have up to 8 conditions that I can add. And then once those conditions are in there, I have the ability to combine them in if, and, or Boolean statements, to combine intelligence, to do some powerful stuff if you so choose it. You can be very, very targeted with multiple conditions in those. We're only going to need one for our use case here. I just want to call out, condition 1. Again, this field passes through your alert and shows in the message. So we want to use, again, a more friendly name than condition 1. And I also highly recommend as a best practice that you standardize on the naming that you use here. When I think about alerting, I'm always thinking about full integration with an ITSI ticket suite where each field that we pass has a very targeted description of what it contains and a standard, schema that we're applying, standard naming structure, all that, right? So condition 1, I don't like. I'm going to say application app agent down. Again, whatever you choose here, I just think it's important to be consistent. I can do a single metric. I can do metric expressions to combine metrics, with mathematical expressions. So just know we can get really powerful in these. And keep it simple here. We're just going to use a single metric. Again, this metric is reporting as a 1 on the back end. I'm getting a 1 every time my app is up and my agent is up. And my AppD agent can't be up unless my app is up. So they tell me the same thing. Can this go down and the app still be up? Yes, if there's a communication problem with the controller. But so maybe I wouldn't say app is down. I've had clients where I say metric reporting is down. You know what I mean? So a network blip can make your app look like it's not available to AppD because the metric didn't get there. So just be aware of that. So agent is down. We're going to select a metric here. Agent, app agent availability. This is a standard metric collected by both your Java and .NET agents, etc. That once we've loaded as an additional argument in your app, starts reporting. This metric only reports when your app and the agent are up and able to send, caveat, and able to send data to the controller successfully. It means both. So, I would not say if you have a network blip and this fires because of the network blip, that it was a false positive. It's still important to know you aren't getting metrics at all. So your entire observability strategy is not in place if this fires. Within baseline, we're going to keep things simple here. I want to call out, a lot of times there's multiple ways we can accomplish what we want. In this case, I want to alert when the value is less than 1 or not equal to 1. So I have choices here to accomplish that work. I'm just going to do is not equal to 1. Okay. Trigger only when violation occurs 15 times in the last 30 minutes. 30 minutes here, I want to call out, correlates directly to use data from 30 minutes here. If I expanded that to 120, I would see different, or down to 1. I would see that reflected here. Why would I want to use this setting? I really like this setting to as my toggle for show me when a failure is sustained. I don't want to send an alert for a flapping blip, right? And if I'm looking at 30 minutes of data, which I've selected in that overview tab, and I can see it on this screen for validation, if I were to check this in 30 minutes, I'm going to have 30 data points. With this unchecked, 1 minute of that 30 minutes, if any of the data points is not a 1, it's going to make this fail. But again, sometimes network blips happen. There are real world use cases where a metric doesn't make it to the endpoint. So I don't want to alert on that. I want an app team to be notified when the app is down for longer. If I check this box now, I'm saying 15 of the 30 data points in 30 minutes need to not be 1. It's a great way when I got my condition dialed in, when I'm targeting the right condition and I have the right threshold in it, but it's still flapping. I know I have the right number. The tool's telling me I have the right number, but we just get this 1 minute blip that goes over it. This is your kind of a mechanism to smooth those out. Now, evaluation for no data scenarios. Again, I have flexibility here. Unknown's the default, but if I'm getting no data from the agent, I'm not getting any monitoring data. So I want that to be critical. Whether the app's down or I'm not getting any metrics, I'm not getting anything. That's what this tells me when it fires. So because agent availability is either up, down, we're not going to have a warning criteria in this. But in our next example, I'll show you the warning criteria. We're just going to have this go green, red. Critical criteria turns my node. If an individual node goes down, it would turn it red, or if it's not getting data. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now we're going to make an overall application response time too high one, but this one we're going to do a staggered alert. I want it to turn yellow when it crosses a certain threshold and red when it crosses a higher threshold. So we'll show you how to do that. That, when you start to look at this view, can really help you dial in. Okay, I already know this one. This example needs to be tuned. 89 alerts is too, but when I look at this view, maybe I'm only seeing it cross the yellow value. I just want to call out future state. Once you're comfortable with health rules, these views tell you how good did we do with the conditions that we set. So again, we're going to go create, give it a name for our standard. We're going to keep it enabled. Always, again, 3030 as our starting point. Affected entities rather than tier node health. This time we're going to select overall application performance. Notice nothing's populating down below because we don't even need to make those choices. The app is the highest level thing that we show health for, so we don't need to get more specific in there. Critical criteria, we're going to add a condition, and in here I'm going to put overall application response. For this condition, we're going to use is greater than 500. Single metric again. Select a metric. We're going to do average response time, greater than specific value, 500. I want this to be a sustained failure, so we're going to require it to be over 500 for 15 out of 30 minutes. And because I want to have a warning criteria, now I'm going to go over to this tab, and I just want to call out this button. Boom. If I click it, I don't need to go through all the menu items, especially if I had 8 conditions in an and or Boolean. It gets really hard to recraft that identically. That button ensures parity in everything, and then you have to adjust the value. So we're going to go ahead and save. Now we're going to go ahead over to actions. Again, this is where action suppression comes into play. We used always enabled. So if we wanted to disable the action firing, but have the color change in the tool based on health rule evaluation still, I'd use an action suppression over a maintenance or a health rule schedule. If I click create here, I just want to call out where you keep it basic. We're going to use send an email in our example, but you can see we have the ability to take thread dumps, diagnostics. In a later session, we're going to show some integrations with third-party tools, right? Like via an HTTP template. So that's coming. But we have the ability to run scripts, integrate with Jira. In our case, we're just going to send a basic email, action name, and we're just going to use a fake email for now. Go ahead and save that. Now we have an action to send an email, and we'll quickly discuss policy here. This is the last bit that I'm going to go over in my talk here. But name, obviously, I'm a proponent of naming standards. I'm just going to call it EIS test policy enabled, self-explanatory. I can turn the policy off and on with this checkbox if I edit it. In the future, I wouldn't mess with execute items in batch unless support tells you to. Health rule violation events. As my best practice that I generally work with and my customers, when I know health rules are working, I'm simply going to start violation events when they start. Remember, I talked about wait time after violation, alert continues. That's if I wanted those every 30 minutes, that's where I'd check this. Remember though, every box that I check here in health rule violation events potentially adds more emails. I always want to send the least amount of emails as possible. I try to shoot for really less than 4 to 5 health rule events per application per day with a highly tuned application. And those are, and in production, those, 10, depending on how many health rules we have, there's an effort to tune down that much noise. Do I want to send them when it ends? I prefer that people, respond to them versus wait for the end email in their email box. But there's use cases that customers have that these are perfectly reasonable choices and align with requirements, right? Maybe they want to see those event continues because they're doing full-blown event management and want to correlate every alert with that incident that gets opened, right? That's where we can do that stuff with these options. Anomalies we're going to talk about in the next meeting. We're going to leave them out. We're only doing health rules here, but just know anomalies are another type of an event that they're not health rule events. They're generated with intelligence through the AppD platform. We could have a separate policy in our second meeting, for example, to handle policy or anomalies, right? We might have a separate, or we could include it in one policy. Not everybody that I work with will send anomalies to production alert systems. Something I highly recommend. They are valuable, and looking at them in the tool, at least, is going to definitely help you with root cause analysis and mean time to repair. Other events that we have here, these are a lot of informational events or different categories for most app teams, most customers that are going to use the platform. They're not going to use these. Slow transactions are usually alerted on with health rules, but you can do it with a policy as well, right? So you have choices there. The other ones are a lot of informational events that AppD just tracks automatically. Just be aware, the more checkboxes that we have, test these policies. Make sure that you don't have a policy that's sending 100 emails the first time you test to somebody, because it's really hard to overcome that initial shock. Configure the policy only when the health rules are working. Policy is the last step in the process of going all the way to production alerting. You can do custom events. A lot of people, just know we have a lot of filter stuff. You don't need to use this to be successful. I very rarely see this in practice. Health rule scope. Want to call out this: policies by default apply to every health rule. I may not want that in a production system. That means if my team member, Chris, comes and is testing something for him, if I had any health rule, that health rule that he saved would be automatically added to my policy if this radial was selected. So got to be very careful about who can create health rules as well. If we have, enterprise policies, a real good way though is if I select the specific health rules I want in my policy, I've now gated the elevation to enabling them for the policy, right? We've added a little bit of arbitration to it. Object scope, not very commonly used again, but let's say, where would I use that? Let's say I had an app and I had two different escalation strategies, one for server compute should go to this team and app error should go to that team. I could have two policies with separate scopes, one for the server objects, compute objects, and one for the app objects, and route them to two different teams. That's kind of how I could use scope in practice. We're just going to go on any object because really this is what matters to us. It's just these two health rules. And then actions, I'm going to add my email action, select it and save it. So really, hopefully kind of an intro if you're new to health rules on some of the dials and switches and what they mean. More to come, and we'll use the feedback. Certainly, I'll use the feedback to know if I need to add any detail to upcoming sessions. Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, great job, Drew. That was extremely informative. And obviously, the experience comes out when you start walking through and showing everything, how it all works, all the scenarios you'd be giving. We had an attendee giving some really good information in the chat as well. So if you are on this call, watching, following along, go check out what one of your fellow attendees was saying as well. He was pointing out, if you're dealing with things that spin up and spin down a lot, you would want to use more of the tier-based notifications. And then also, he was expressing that where he works, they also use the upgraded checkbox in the policies, where if it's a long running warning and then it moves up to a critical, where Drew was kind of showing the bare minimum of what you need to be effective with these health rules and the scenarios of when you would use which other ones. So, this is a community, this is a discussion. So if you guys want to share how you guys use things, you're more than welcome to. But at this point, let's go ahead and start going into the Q&A. I don't see any coming in through the actual Q&A panel, but I did see some chats, so I appreciate the participation. For sake of time, we're going to progress on, but if you do have a question and we do see something come through, I can backtrack and go back to it. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. Like I said, if you still have a question, bring it up. We'll stop, backtrack, and go back to your question, okay? So in addition to these enablements with the Expert Insight series and our YouTube page, you're also going to need to start going towards a route where you're going to need certification. You want to build your resume. You want to get into other things that Cisco is involved in, data centers, AI, networking. I mean, there's so much, so much with that statement. But at the same time, we highly encourage you to go out to the u.cisco.com, which is the Cisco University. There's instructor-led courses. If you're a customer already, you will get a lot of free access to getting into the on-demand content. And then if your company or your organization pays for extra allowances there, you get the instructor-led courses with labs and everything. All right, so where can you go to see all of our latest on-demand content, as well the recordings for these Expert Insight series? Go check out our YouTube. It's going to be youtube.com /@ Cisco Observability. That is our dedicated channel. It is dedicated for you guys. We make a lot of short videos. We have some long videos. We have these webinars. We have these Expert Insight series. They're all there in a good mix. There's playlists. So depending on what you guys are doing, maybe you guys are creating an internal website for all of your team to get familiar with AppD and improve your observability, or you're just wanting to improve on your own. Either way, we've got you covered. Go check it out and get enabled. It's and at the same time, we also have comments available. So if you want to give us feedback, let us know how we can make things better, what other things you would want to learn in terms of topics, or even the formatting of delivery. If you have any feedback on that, we'd love to hear from you. So speaking of reaching out and wanting to hear from you guys, for today's session, if you guys have any feedback for us, please check out the link here. I'm going to paste it into the chat, a full summary of resources. So all the docs that have been relayed by our wonderful panelists, as well, some of the other things that were brought up, there's a good summary of it. So if you want to grab that, it's all in one message. It's a lot easier for you. Go ahead and do that. And then, make sure you grab that. If you are using the link to go to Slido, make sure you use the passcode, and also, say that you want to give feedback and it's anonymous. That's Slido is how you do it. If you wanted to let us know right now in chat, that's okay as well. But check it out. Let us know how we did. Let us know how we can make things better. And then otherwise, the second session of this series for achieving proactive monitoring will be on February 26th. And I provided that registration link there in that list of resources in the chat. So if you haven't done so already and you were just forwarded this invite, do sign up and register for the whole series. It's going to be a really good one. Each one's going to build on top of one another. So, if this was a little bit more review, the next one will probably have a lot more in-depth knowledge of what you're after. So until next time, thank you, and please check us out on YouTube. Bye, all.